Welcome everyone to our first Answer Indiana webinar. I'm so happy to see how many people are on. Thank you guys so much for showing up. We're going to have a great webinar tonight. I'm excited to show what we've got for you. My name is Lindsay. I'm an organizer with Answer Indiana. Answer stands for Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. It started as a national coalition back in the early 2000s, but Answer Indiana is a sector that was made in 2017, but we're really growing right now. We really took off in the last year or so. But yeah, so this webinar is going to be four parts, 3 speakers, and then a Q&A. And these webinars are going to be held every month. They're going to be political training, political updates, because with the news and social media being handled by the billionaires, we want to make sure that you know where the people are at and what the people are fighting for, because we're in those streets. So we're going to tell you what's going on while, whatever news channel you might be watching, they're not telling you what's really happening. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and move on to our first section, which is going to be Tanya. Welcome, Tanya.
Hi, my name is Tanya. I'm a member of Answer and one of the leadership team, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about why I joined Answer. I joined Act Now to Stop War and End Racism because I know in my gut that racism and war are wrong. I don't think someone's gut will ever steer them wrong. However, it's always important to apply critical thinking. And that critical thinking is directly tied to these statistics that are very easily found about healthcare disparities in this country, about leadership disparities, incarceration differences, education under-resourcing. All those things are directly tied to the systems that we currently have in this country, which are inherently racist. I wanted to change that. I want to change that. I also wanted to learn more about activism. I wanted to dig deeper into that. I've done some volunteering, but haven't done anything really long term. And I wanted to learn more about how to disrupt systems, disassemble systems, and build new systems with comrades. And I've started to do that here as well. I have a gap in my historical education. So some of the learning that I do here really helps fill that gap. And one of my favorite things and the unexpected thing about being an Answer member is how I'm learning alongside members and other leadership here. I didn't expect to do that. I appreciate it. There's definitely dialogue and collaboration and learning side by side. There's parallel learning, and that is enjoyable to me as well. It also feels sort of freeing. It frees me from not knowing anything, and it frees me from having to know everything. So you might keep that in mind if you're considering joining or just checking us out. The other thing is war and imperialism. I'm learning how there's a direct through line from that to racism and back again. And I am also enjoying the cross-pollination of other organizations at the Indie Liberation Center, especially Hope Packages, which is a direct action network for unsheltered people, and the Party for Socialism and Liberation, PSL. They have interesting, edifying events also. The historical information, current events information, and dialogue around all of the things I'm learning with the people here at Answer are really helpful in my desire to deconstruct the current world and assemble a new world where everyone's needs are met and people are treated with compassion and their humanity is recognized as a default. I don't know that it's possible, and I'm learning more and more. Part of what I'm learning is that I may not see that time in my life, but that doesn't matter. I'm still doing the work. And I'm not going to be always doing the right thing, or doing it the way that everyone thinks I should do it, but I'm still doing the work. I'm still learning and advocating and disassembling and deconstructing, and that's part of what Answer is about. So I encourage you to come learn with us, from us, and then also for you to come show us what you're about. Come to an event, email us. Everybody's super approachable. Before the events start and afterward, everybody's interested in learning from other people. We're all just curious people as well. So I encourage you to come out and check us out. It will help change you in a positive way and hopefully change the world.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm really glad to hear that you've had a good experience with us, because it's been a pleasure to work with you and see how much you've grown as a leader alongside us. And that leads me into what I'm so excited to share with you guys. We are starting a membership program. Sign up and join the peace movement today. We are Answer Indiana, and yet we're all based in Indianapolis, and we got to change that, right? We want to be all over Indiana, and we want to be connected. We want everyone to be in the know. We want to have this massive, anti-racism, anti-war movement that can change the world, man. I'm so excited for this. All you got to do is sign up with us. There's going to be an application link. And membership might look different for everyone. Maybe it's just the financial contribution. Maybe some people are just really interested in these webinars, maybe that's what they want to come to. But there are some people who are looking for the chance to be a leader, be an organizer, learn what it takes to be an activist. And lucky for you, we're looking for those kind of people, right? And we are experienced, and we're ready to take on people who have that energy, that drive, and we're going to help you become the leaders of this better world that we're going to build together. So sign up to join today, please. It's a great time. I love the work I do. I say it all the time. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Brian, who is going to tell you more about how we came to be. So go ahead, Brian. Thanks.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Brian, and I will be telling you a little bit about Answer Indiana and our history. Answer is an anti-war, anti-racist coalition that was formed just 3 days after the attacks on September 11, 2001. The name Answer was derived from the anti-war slogan, "War is not the answer," in reference to the Bush administration's desire to engage in war with various Middle Eastern countries, such as Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Iran, and Lebanon. The name was later made into the acronym Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. After the 9/11 attacks, many other peace organizations and social justice groups halted rallies and protests against the Bush administration, citing it as an inappropriate time to take action. They hung American flags on their websites, and meanwhile, any opposition to the war or the Bush administration from within the government, either Democrat or Republican, had disappeared, giving Bush the power to wage war and spy on the world. This lack of opposition created an intense environment of Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism in the early 2000s that is unfortunately still prevalent today. Arab, Muslim, Middle Eastern communities in general in the United States faced intense repression after the attacks, being rounded up, arrested, and surveilled by the FBI. echoing efforts made against Japanese American civilians following the attack on Pearl Harbor. While many other organizations chose to retreat, showing no real opposition to Bush, Answer was formed to act and organize. Answer dedicated time and energy working with the affected communities to stand hand in hand against overbearing repression of our Arab and Muslim neighbors. Answer took a stand against the manipulation of raw emotion that many Americans felt after the 9/11 attacks that was used to garner support for war in the Middle East. At the time, the position that Answer took was not a popular one. As many other groups that had marched with Answer in coalition in the past had stopped, and 90% of Americans polled at the time supported a military response, though only 46% supported a long-term war. Answer may not have taken the popular position at the time, but through steadfast conviction and foresight, was proven to have had the correct position, as a long-term war was the eventual result. News had broken during a rally that bombs were being dropped on Afghanistan. Answer organizers began chanting, "Stop the bombing of Afghanistan." Much of the crowd refused to join, however, showing how isolated Answer had become after the 9/11 attacks, even among left peace activists. Because of the amazing conviction Answer had shown, it had emerged as a genuine coalition composed of a dozen organizations, despite, or perhaps because, of the isolation Answer had endured. These organizations were mostly small and composed of Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, Latin American, and Cuban solidarity and civil rights organizations. This was operated as a true democratic coalition in which every group was consulted before decisions were made. In April 2002, a massive anti-war movement had formed in the U.S. and around the world. In the U.S., massive monthly events had begun in October that year, organized by leaders and activists involved in the Party for Socialism and Liberation. During this time, a split had occurred in the anti-war movement, the cause of which is notable, as in March of 2002, Israel had militarily reinvaded the West Bank and Palestine, which had previously been seized in June of 1967. The purpose of this maneuver was to destroy the Intifada, the growing insurrection movement of the Palestinian people against Israeli occupation. This reinvasion included massacres in Jenin and other parts of the West Bank, and it was fully backed by the Bush administration. Answer at the time insisted on taking a stand against the occupation for the Palestinian people with demonstrations under the slogans "No to Israeli occupation" and "No to the war in Iraq." The other coalition had insisted that having explicit anti-Israel and pro-Palestine demands would alienate any potential liberal allies. The true meaning of this sentiment being that it would cut the movement off from any support from the Democratic Party. There has been precedence for this, as during the Israeli invasion of the West Bank and Gaza in 1967, which took place during the anti-Vietnam War movement. Any organizers who advocated for a slogan opposing Israeli aggression were kicked out and not allowed to speak at any rallies or teach-ins. In March of 2002, the coalition formed from the split of the anti-war movement had stated that they would no longer stay in coalition with Answer for as long as it supports the Palestinian cause. They called for a demonstration in Washington, D.C., a few blocks south of an Answer demonstration, which drew around 100,000 people, while the broader coalition drew 15,000. The reason for the strength of Answer's demonstration was due to Answer's insistence in building bonds with the American Muslim, the Arab American, and the South Asian American community organizations inside the U.S., reaching out to organizations speaking in community settings such as mosques throughout the East Coast. Building bridges such as these allowed Answer and these communities to play an enduring role in the evolution of the anti-war movement for years. The demonstration was the largest action for Palestine inside the U.S. at that point, as up to that point it was seen as an impossibility to organize a large-scale anti-war movement in explicit support for the Palestinian people and cause, taking the strategy of clear, direct messaging with slogans such as "End the occupation of Palestine" and "No war against Iraq." The other coalition would change names, but eventually come to be known as United for Peace and Justice, or UFPJ. The sharp division between the two became a hallmark of political and tactical splits in anti-war movements. However, both coalitions succeeded in organizing huge demonstrations in the hundreds of thousands. Despite this division, the Answer Coalition promoted a tactic of a united front between the two. This created a complicated but very educational situation for a new generation of activists and organizers who learned how to struggle for political principles while employing tactical grace for the sake of a larger movement. In March 19, 2003, the United States had begun the invasion of Iraq, and within 3 weeks, the Iraqi government and military were completely dismantled. The U.S. took control of Baghdad, and on April 9th, 3 days later, the Answer Coalition responded with a demonstration in Washington, D.C. under the new slogan, "Occupation is not liberation." Due to the swift victory of the U.S. military, the political mood towards the war in Iraq had shifted, as the Bush administration was able to act triumphant. Many liberal detractors and critics, worried Iraq would be another Vietnam situation, had suddenly embraced the Bush administration's bold action to topple the Iraqi government, showing a clear lack of principle. The day of the Answer demonstration, April 12, 2003, 30,000 people showed up, instead of the hundreds of thousands that had been present at the previous demonstrations. This new phase of the anti-war movement grew over time as the Iraqi armed and civil resistance grew in opposition to the U.S. occupation. In March of 2004, the Answer Coalition held a united front action with UFPJ on the anniversary of the invasion, attracting over 100,000 protesters marching in New York City. While today it may seem obvious that Palestine would be centered in anti-war or anti-imperialist movements, the opposite was the case for many decades. The April 2002 demonstration was significant for breaking the taboo that had prohibited the inclusion of the Palestinian struggle as part of the larger anti-war movement in the U.S. This could not have been done without the close relationship Answer has with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, or PSL. After the end of the Bush administration, the anti-war movement had weakened. Other groups dropped out of the coalition, and Answer became more of an independent organization than a coalition of several other groups. Answer had managed to stay activated alongside PSL and other shifting groups during various struggles against imperialism and war. However, locally, we began organizing in 2017 as Answer Indiana, in order to get a feel for the political terrain of central Indiana. At the time, our organizers were located in Columbus, Bloomington, and Greencastle. We were not large or experienced enough to lead protests, instead joining rallies as an Answer contingent. These rallies included the 2018 March for Science and Families Belong Together, where we met organizers with the Muslim Youth Collective. Our first struggle in the city of Indianapolis organized against the Sit-Lie Ordinance, which would make it illegal to be sitting or lying down on city streets or sidewalks from 6 a.m. to midnight. This was clearly intended to subject the city's unhoused population to harassment of fines by police for simply existing, a direct attack on our poorest and most vulnerable. Answer Indiana was able to develop a professional website and, authored by our co-coordinators, Sam James and Noah Leininger, produced a paper that accurately framed the struggle and successfully defeated the Sit-Lie Ordinance in 2018 and has yet to be revisited since. On October 5th, 2023, PSL, Answer Indiana, and other member organizations such as Indy 10 Black Lives Matter and Hope Packages helped found the Indianapolis Liberation Center, which is maintained solely through the work of volunteers and donations from community members. The ILC has served as an effective center for mobilization and support in support of the Palestinian liberation struggle, with close collaborations with allied organizations such as Middle Eastern Student Association, Students for Justice in Palestine, Butler, Jewish Voice for Peace, Indiana, and the Palestinian Youth Movement. Using this center, we have managed to effectively organize in rapid succession protests, rallies, art builds, panels, and marches, as well as chartering a bus to Washington, D.C. for the March for Palestine held November 4th, 2024. Since opening the Indy Liberation Center, we have managed to bring in many other member organizations under one roof, due to taking the time to build relationships, trust, and mutual respect that is necessary for coalition building. But what matters more than the number of groups is the diversity of struggles that they lead and the sectors of our cities marginalized, oppressed, and exploited that we can bring together and engage.
Thanks so much, Brian. That was super informative. As someone who was brought into this movement by like the Palestinian struggle, I find it really interesting to learn more about like the struggles that came before us, right? Because whether it's Palestine, Iran, Iraq, Yugoslavia, Vietnam, unfortunately, I could go on, but whatever war it is, we, the working people, all we want is true and like lasting peace. We want better schools, we want better healthcare, we want better housing. We don't want death and destruction, certainly not from our money, right? Which kind of leads us into our next section and the last one. Rissa is going to speak to us about the People's Assembly for Peace and Justice. That was held in Dayton, Ohio over Memorial Day weekend. It was a counter to the NATO parliament that was taking place at the same time. She's going to tell you more about NATO. If you don't know who they are, you're going to find out. But yeah, Rissa, please tell us about the assembly.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar tonight and taking the time to learn a little bit more about the anti-war movement and how you can get involved in fighting back. This past weekend, I had the opportunity to join other working class people from across the country in a protest against NATO in Dayton, Ohio. The People's Assembly for Justice and Peace rallied in demanding an end to NATO and their endless wars. While working class people are receiving cuts to their Medicaid and food assistance, Trump's big, beautiful bill is being fueled to again pour money into wars across the globe. First, let me provide you with some background about NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. After the destruction of World War II, the United States had come out seemingly on top, still being able to cling to their growing hegemony as a major player in geopolitics. While Europe's economies lay in financial ruin, the US had started the reconstruction of an international world order. At the same time, confronting the rise of US hegemony in the imperialist camp were the Soviet Union and its allies. The Soviet Union's influence continued to expand its sphere, particularly to the Baltic states, including West Germany and Eastern Europe. It is in this context that NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, was founded in 1949 as an ostensibly defensive alliance against the supposed Soviet threat facing the West. It grouped major imperialist powers together with the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada. The initial European core was France, Italy, Portugal, Luxembourg, Iceland, the Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, and Denmark, with Germany joining in 1955. They are founded on a couple of different principles. One is a Latin phrase that translates to a mind unfettered in deliberation, and the collective principle defense in Article 5 of their treaty that says an attack on one nation should be interpreted as an attack on all. In reality, NATO has always been an offensive, not a defensive alliance, seeking to maintain order by imposing their version of democracy on non-compliant nations. Face-to-face globally with a strengthened Soviet regime based on an alternative social system to capitalism, the main fear of US imperialism was not one of immediate military aggression, but political conquest. In true imperialist fashion, NATO utilized violence in the form of growing military aggression towards Soviet countries, threatening nuclear war, but also stoking fears here in the US that the Soviet Union was threatening nuclear war on us. With NATO's continued accumulation of countries, U.S. military interest in its growing occupation and presence in these countries would also grow as well. That doesn't mean, however, that there weren't tensions and divisions regarding NATO. both within different sections of the US state and amongst imperialist powers. There were constant clashes over how much the European members in the US should be spending on the defense of Europe, as governments constantly came under pressure from working class people demanding more spending on public services. There were divided positions over the installation of nuclear weapons in Europe, with massive protests erupting in the 1950s and in particular the early to mid-1980s in many NATO countries. In 1995, NATO had its first action in Europe bombing Yugoslavia, defending Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia. A civil war between Yugoslavia and Bosnia took place, sparked and infiltrated by US and Western European powers. Leaders of NATO held a conference in Dayton, Ohio, where they signed the Dayton Accords. Advertised as a peace agreement, this document initiated the annihilation of Yugoslavia, as the document had stated that NATO had the right to enforce the peace agreement when necessary. NATO intervened in the ethnic conflict in Yugoslavia on March 24, 1999, under the pretext of protecting Kosovo from Serbian forces. The ethnic conflict in Serbia started in the late 1990s between the government led by Slobodan Milosevic and the Kosovo Liberation Army. It resulted in large-scale violence, displacement, and loss of lives. NATO forces had conducted massive airstrikes to smash Yugoslav forces. The war ended with the Kumanovo Treaty between the International Security Forces and the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia on June 9, 1999. Whereby the Yugoslav Serbian forces agreed to a phased withdrawal from Kosovo as a way to make way for international civilian and security presence in NATO. At the rally and the assembly, we heard from many great speakers and organizers, highlighting again the importance of why we met in Dayton, Ohio. Danica Kotovich of Code Pink shared the significant historic links between the military alliance and the city of Dayton. Danica said that NATO effectively destroyed the country that my family is from, the former Yugoslavia. She goes on to say, one of the peace agreements that was signed to end the wars in Yugoslavia was called the Dayton Accords, because they were negotiated in Dayton, Ohio. Dayton, Ohio is not anywhere near Yugoslavia. The negotiating process was led by the US and the West with very, very little regard for the people actually living in Yugoslavia at the time. While working class people in Dayton are directly affected by NATO's decisions as well. While money is being poured into creating an aggressive alliance of death and destruction, many Ohioans are without access to proper health care, child care, and affordable housing. It was important for us to highlight that no working class people asked for a decrease of funding in their needs, and no one asked for more wars either. Not only is this money not going to people's needs in bombs, it continues to line the pockets of big defense corporations like Boeing and Honeywell, as well as the capitalist ruling class. To quote a Palestinian student organizer in describing the true character of NATO, she goes on to say, "It is a military gang, dealer of death, enforcing and trying to bomb us into submission." This was my first out-of-state protest that I'd ever attended, and I'd truly been super enlightened from the experience. I had the assignment to hold the banner along with others leading the march, and as we marched, seeing the amount of militant police that had been called in was truly appalling. I've never seen so many police officers lined up and down the sidewalk on their bicycles and horses, and that particular moment stood out to me because when we are talking about defense budgets increasing, that also rings true for policing as well. And it made me wonder how many social services, libraries, schools, and budgets had been cut there in Dayton to fund their policing instead. Hearing from the panelists during the assembly, I had gained so much knowledge and felt a deep sense of pride and connection, as well as we all had a common goal in mind: peace, solidarity, and liberation for all working class people, not just here in America, but all across the globe. We also had the opportunity to hear from people in Kenya and Ghana about their demands to get NATO and AFRICOM out of Africa. In 2007, the U.S. Africa Command, or U.S. AFRICOM, was established by the U.S. Department of Defense, quote, in response to expanding our partnerships and interests in Africa. However, on their website, they quite literally state, U.S. AFRICOM, with partners and allies, supports U.S. government efforts in Africa to advance U.S. national interests and promote regional security, stability, and prosperity. It has to make you wonder, though, prosperity and stability for whom, though? U.S. AFRICOM serves as an ally to NATO, and its expansion as of today consists of at least 29 bases across 15 African countries and maintains a presence in about 38 African countries. This military network covers 60% of the nations on the continent. U.S. AFRICOM claims to work with African partners for a secure and prosperous Africa. Yet this is the very same institution that is responsible for turning countries like Libya, once the highest ranked African country on the UN Human Development Index, into a failed state with constant civil war, return to open slave markets, and armed militias terrorizing civilians. As of May 8, 2025, U.S. AFRICOM under General Michael Langley stated that they will be on track for a record high number of airstrikes in Somalia, exceeding the 63 strikes it launched in the country in 2019. Amnesty International and the International Committee of the Red Cross have recorded dozens of civilians that were killed by the U.S. airstrikes, while U.S. AFRICOM reports minimal to zero in official reports. It was important to highlight the impact of the growing war machine that continues to destabilize countries and the working class people around the world. Understanding that our fight for peace and an end to wars means that we need the collective strength of our communities, not just locally, but nationally and globally as well. It is especially critical that we here in the United States and in the Midwest continue to fight as we are in the belly of the beast. Being able to confront the ruling imperialist that day directly, again, solidifies our unity and demands for peace. ANSWER has held many calls to action in continuing the push for the anti-war movement, including demanding a stop to endless wars and bombings of Syria, Libya, and Palestine. ANSWER is involved in many actions to fight against war and racism. While we also hold educational meetings and webinars, it is just as equally important to be in the streets where our real power lies. There's a growing movement of people who are standing up against violence waged on other countries in the name of imperialism. I, along with other folks from the Indianapolis area, had the opportunity to connect with Hoosiers from across Indiana who had also joined the rally that day. This continues to reiterate the fact that there is a growing push for change. The larger public having NATO meet in Dayton, Ohio might seem pretty random, but understanding its specific historical links to engaging in war across the globe is important and adds strength and context as to how this affects us here in the Midwest. The last speaker, Joe Tash, shared these words that were very impactful and truly captured the message of why we were there on Sunday. To quote Joe, he says, "We came from Dayton, we came from all across Ohio, we came from all across the United States to say that we reject a foreign policy that is based on domination and exploitation. We reject a political and economic system that prioritizes militarism over the needs of the people and the planet. We embrace cutting military spending and investing in jobs, investing in education, investing in housing, investing in healthcare, and investing in ending poverty. We embrace that commitment to fight for a more just society with everyone in this room, with the millions of people across the country and the billions of people across the world who are also ready for change." Tonight, you all had the opportunity to expand your knowledge on the effects of war, not only of the countries in which they are being waged, but on us here in the U.S. as well. We also gained background into the mission and creation behind NATO. I hope tonight's presentation has shed a light on how we can continue to advocate for peace and justice in our society. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rissa. I really appreciate you summing that up for us because, before the People's Assembly, I had to learn a lot about NATO because I did not know enough. But there I learned more, and, attending the march was really invigorating. And then we sat together and we planned for peace and justice, while the war makers that were literally across the street were planning their next war. There was just something so amazing about that, because we're not going to let them do that again. Are you kidding me? The destruction of Yugoslavia, that was in 1999. Oh my goodness, do not get me started. Anyway, that concludes our presentations. Thank you, Tanya, Brian, and Rissa, for all the work that you did to research your topics and present them. We're going to take a quick little break to give you the time to ask your questions. So go ahead and type your little questions in the Q&A box. and we will answer them in just a minute.